Good morning, everybody. My name is Jackie Porter and I'm the Cabinet Member for the Built Environment and Wellbeing, and my remit includes the local plan. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's event, which is an important part of the local plan consultation. This consultation is being run online until midnight, Monday, 12th of April. This is our third public event online, and we're running this as a Teams live event using Slido for the questions. You may have seen that at the beginning of the presentation. We're putting forward 9 strategic issues and seeking your views on the options. We're asking you to be involved today in 3 different ways. The first part is a short quiz. It's an opportunity for you to check your own knowledge about Winchester, and it's setting the scene of the local plan. We'll have a practice question first to check the technology is working. The second part is a series of questions on each of the strategic issues. These will be retained as evidence towards the local plan process. The third opportunity is the question section. We'll answer questions after the presentation, but you're welcome to put up your question at any time. Any that aren't answered by the end of our session today, because we don't have time perhaps, will be responded to and put up as an FAQ online on our website. So the climate crisis is the biggest challenge of all as we face the future. Winchester City Council has declared a climate emergency, and it's taking every opportunity to reduce the district's carbon footprint and find ways to generate power from non-fossil fuel sources. Our plan to 2038 will need to mitigate the effect of climate change too. Planning documents are never easy. I'm therefore delighted that you've come along today to take part in this event where we can share with you information on the strategic issues and priorities document and our new local plan website. Each section on the website includes an open box too. We'd really like to hear your views and be part of Winchester City Council's local plan journey. If you'd like to ask a question, there's a toolbar on the right-hand side of the screen for you to submit those questions as the meeting progresses, and you can do this at any time. We'd normally be sharing safety details at this point, but of course you're in your own home, so you can come and go as you please. This event is being recorded and it will be placed on our new local plan website, www.localplan.winchester.gov.uk. It will be helpful to see who's asking the question. We have a lot of people on the call today, but if you'd like to stay anonymous, please remove your name when you submit it. I'll now hand you over to Adrian Fox, who's our Strategic Planning Manager at Winchester City Council, and he will outline the structure of the event. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Adrian Fox. As Councillor Porter mentioned, I'm the Strategic Planning Manager, and thank you very much for taking up your time today to join us at this live event. This is a really exciting opportunity for you to help us shape the future of our district to 2038. We really do want as many people as possible to respond to this consultation, and I'm going to talk you through how you can do that in an easy and simple way. Next slide, please, Beth. So as Councillor Porter mentioned, we've got a new local plan website, which is www.localplan.winchester.gov.uk. I hope that everybody's had a chance to have a look at it. We've tried to make it as easy and as navigable as possible. It does identify what a local plan is and why it's important, and the various steps that we need to go through to produce our local plan, which I'll outline in a minute. It identifies there are 9 key topics, and they are interlocking topics, but at the heart of our new local plan is the climate emergency and how we address that. Next slide, please. We've introduced a new mapping feature on the new website. This is in light of what the white paper said, where they want people to have easily accessible information according to their postcode. So this mapping feature allows you to put your postcode in and to see various things that are happening around you. For example, if somebody's put forward a site in the Sheila, so in other words, a land developer has put forward a site to be promoted for development, you'll better see that on the actual website. There is also the confines and list of buildings and conservation areas. We are going to be adding and developing to this mapping feature as we move through the local plan process, and we'd be keen to know what other features you'd like on this mapping feature to help you in the future. Next slide, please. So local plan process. We are right at the beginning of the process in terms of seeking views on our strategic issues and priorities document, but it's a really important step because that helps set the direction and the strategy for the new local plan. and I'll come on to some specifics on that later on in the presentation. We need to review any comments that we receive as part of this consultation, and then develop a new style local plan, a draft regulation plan, and consult on that again. We then need to review any comments we've got at that stage and produce another plan, which is a Regulation 19 plan. Apologies for the acronyms, but that's comes from the government. We then need to submit that plan to the government, who will appoint an independent inspector who will oversee and convene an examination in public. And that inspector will hear people for and against in a rounded discussion. The inspector will then publish a report, and then obviously we'll move towards adoption of that plan, hopefully in 2023. So it is a journey that we're going on, and we're right at the beginning of this journey now. Next slide, please. So in terms of the actual strategic issues and priorities consultation, as Councillor Porter mentioned, it's open till the 12th of April, so there's still plenty of time to submit your comments. We have an existing vision in the core strategy, but we need to roll that forward and test and see what has changed since we adopted the original core strategy. Clearly, climate change, the national lockdown, the way that we live and work all influence the local plan. We've identified a series of objectives. At the heart of obviously the local plan is carbon neutrality, but we've identified a number of environmental, social and economic objectives, and we're seeking feedback on those to obviously measure whether or not we're moving in the right direction. Because the key thing is, if you were looking in the future at 2038, what would Winchester District look like? What would the key components be? Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand over to Beth, who's going to talk you through our Slido polling system. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Yes, so as Councillor Porter mentioned at the beginning, we are going to be using Slido, and you can download the app or go to slido.com. And this app does work best when used on a phone or a tablet or an iPad. So if you can please watch this live event on a laptop and use the Slido on a secondary device, that would be great. And then when you have downloaded it, please type in the code shown on the screen. So that's 6549. So throughout the event, we'll be having a quiz, we'll have word clouds, we'll have polls and rating scales to help inform you on the topics we will cover and help to provide you with some useful background. And it'll also provide you with a chance to have your say and inform you on the local plan. So this is your opportunity to get involved and have your say about what matters to you and help to shape the local plan. So we'll start off with a practice question first. And again, you can remain anonymous, so please don't feel that you have to put your name in. But I'll give everyone a moment to join in the quiz now, and we'll begin. Okay, it's great to see so many people getting involved. We'll move on to the practice question now. I think everyone's had a chance to join in. So the practice question, what day is it today? Is it Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or is it Saturday? Give everyone a few more moments to answer that one. Okay, I think everyone's had a chance to answer that one now. So it is, of course, Friday. I'm glad to see that everybody got that one right. So we'll move on to our first question. So what percentage of carbon, CO2 emissions are under local authority influence? Do we think it's 15%, 30% or 40%? And I'll give everyone a moment now to submit their answers. Okay, so I think everyone's had a chance to answer that one. Let's see what people went with. So we've got quite a split here. So majority of people saying 15% and 30%. And in fact, it is actually 40% local authority influence. Moving on to our next question. What percentage of people are predicted to be over 65 within the Winchester District by 2038? Is it 28.2%, 12.5%, 23.4% or 17.6%? I'll give everyone a moment now to submit their answer. Okay, so the majority of people going with 28.2%, so about 60% say that, and then 23.4% was the second most popular. And it is in fact 28.2% of people will be over 65 by 2038. So how many homes are required to be built in the Winchester District every year? Is it 1,024? Is it 400, 700 or 550? I'll let you submit your answers now. Okay, let's see what everybody thinks. So the majority of people going with 700 homes per year, a few people saying 550, just under a third saying 1,024, and the correct answer is 700. So the majority of you were right there. And moving on to our last question in this quiz. How many listed buildings are there currently within the Winchester District? Is it 2,267, 1,386, 2,038 or 3,791? Okay, everyone's had a chance to answer that one. Let's see with what everybody thought. So the most being 2,038, quite an even split there among the other two. We've got 22% saying almost 4,000 and 35% saying over 2,000 there. And the correct answer is actually 2,267. So I'll hand back to Adrian now, but thank you all for participating in that quiz.
Thank you very much, Beth. Whilst that was a quiz, it hopefully gives you some flavour of some of the key issues that we need to consider as part of developing the local plan. We've divided the local plan up into 9 key issues, 9 key topics, and carbon neutrality is a special kind of issue by itself, even though obviously climate emergency is at the centre of the new local plan. We've got other issues such as biodiversity, natural environment, conserving and enhancing the historic environment, homes for all, the vibrant economy, promoting sustainable transport, living well and low carbon infrastructure, and ensuring the delivery and success of the local plan. They are all kind of interlocking topics, but obviously at the centre of them is the climate emergency. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand to Beth now, and she's going to identify which are the important priorities for you. Thank you, Beth.
Brilliant. Thank you, Adrian. So yeah, we'd just like to hear from all of you what are the most important priorities to you within the new local plan and the key areas that Adrian's just pointed out. And you can choose up to 3 on this one. So is it carbon neutrality, biodiversity and the natural environment, conserving and enhancing historic environment? Is it homes for all, or creating a vibrant economy, promoting sustainable travel, living well, low carbon infrastructure and the local plan viability? Or is it the success and delivery of the local plan? Okay, while we just wait for those last few to submit their answers, it looks like we've got an even split at the top for homes for all and sustainable transport and active travel. Living well is in the top 3 as well. Biodiversity and carbon neutrality in 4th and 5th place, most important priorities to you. Homes for all now in the top spot. Brilliant, thank you for participating. I think everybody's had a chance to submit their answers there. I'll hand back to Adrian now.
Thank you, Beth. As I said, we've got a specific topic on carbon neutrality. You'll be aware that the government obviously has a commitment for the UK to become net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, but the City Council has a much more ambitious target of obviously becoming carbon neutral by 2030. Now, the local plan is one of the tools, and it's important to stress that it's a very important tool, but it is only one of the tools that can help to support the reduction in carbon emissions across the district. Within the actual strategic issues and priorities document, we're proposing that there should be a strategic policy on climate change, and we'd be really keen to hear your feedback on what would be the key components of that policy. And we've identified a number of local policies which would assist the council with moving towards carbon neutrality. And as part of the consultation exercise, if you've got a specific interest in this, you can specifically answer this topic. You don't have to answer the other topics if you don't want to, but we are very keen to hear your feedback on whether or not we've identified the right number of issues and your views on what local policies we could introduce. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand back to Beth now and ask about what important things the local plan can do to reduce carbon emissions.
Thank you, Adrian. Yes, so as we've just discussed, this is a different kind of Slido question. So this is actually a word cloud, and you can submit as many answers as you'd like. And the idea with this one is that if a word is then written again more than once, it'll then grow in size, so we can see what the most important issues there are to everybody. So you can submit your answers now. So what do you think are the most important things the local plan can do in order to reduce carbon emissions? Okay, we've got some really great answers coming through now. So we can see that sustainability and the installation of homes is very important. Carbon neutral homes, reducing traffic in the centre, food waste collection, picking the right locations, traffic, transport, public transport, solar panels, setting a good example, active travel support, and encouraging a modal shift are also quite important. Cheaper train and bus travel. Some really great ones coming through now. Thank you everyone for participating in that. Okay, brilliant. Thank you all. I'll pass back to Adrian now.
Thank you, Beth. The next topic is the biodiversity and natural environment. As part of the consultation, we are seeking views on biodiversity net gain, which is a new requirement by the government, which is going to come into place this year, and offsetting carbon impact and the financial contributions, how they should be used and kind of collected. We are very conscious as a part of the national lockdown, the importance of the natural environment, and open spaces and biodiversities is obviously a very important issue, because obviously people are recreating and walking around because obviously everything else is closed. We are very keen to hear from people the approaches towards countryside protection and whether or not the existing policies that we've got in the local plan are adequate, whether or not they're working or need to be improved. We are aware that organisations such as the CPRE have put forward ideas for a green belt, and what we're keen to see as part of this consultation is feedback whether or not a green belt is justified or needed in the district. And I would refer people to the National Planning Policy Framework, which sets the bar for how a green belt should be designated. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand back to Beth, who's going to do a quick poll. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Adrian. Yes, so we'd like to hear from you on how successful you think the council have been in balancing protecting the countryside from unplanned development. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least successful and 10 being the most successful. Okay, so at the moment it looks like we've got an average score of 7.3. I'll give everyone a few moments now to submit the last few answers. That's great. I think everyone's had a chance now to participate. So I'll hand back to Adrian now.
Thank you, Beth. Next topic is conserving and enhancing the historic environment. We're very blessed in this district with a wealth of historic assets. And what we're keen to do is to receive feedback on whether the existing heritage policies are working or are adequate or need improving. And we're very keen to hear feedback from people on that. And linked to that, obviously with carbon neutrality at the heart of the new local plan, is how can the local plan support energy efficiency improvements to listed buildings whilst protecting the very specific heritage features and not kind of causing a detrimental impact to those. So like I say, we do feel that that's a very interesting topic that we are very keen to get feedback on. Next slide, please. So in terms of homes for all, often a local plan gets very focused on kind of the number of homes and obviously the type of homes. And whilst that is clearly very, very important, it's not the only issue in the local plan. But as part of obviously how we meet our future need, which obviously as we saw in the kind of quiz was around about 700 homes per year, we have put forward 4 alternative high-level strategic options, and we are seeking feedback from people on those. So the first option is we could continue with the current approach of distributing development in accordance with the sustainable hierarchy of settlements. That's, in other words, that's similar to the existing approach in the adopted core strategy. We could, as an alternative, focus more development towards Winchester and other larger, more sustainable settlements. Alternatively, we could consider 1 or more completely new strategic allocations or new settlements to meet our need. Or we could distribute development around the district largely in proportion to the existing settlements. And we are seeking feedback on how we should divide up our future need, which is around about 2,700 homes to 2038. So we are keen to hear feedback on those 4 alternative growth options. Next slide, please, Beth. So I'll hand back to Beth now, who's going to do a quick poll. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Yeah, so we'd be interested to hear from you all how COVID has changed your housing needs. And for this one, you can tick all that apply to you. So is it the need for more flexible spaces, bigger gardens? Is being close to outdoor facilities more or less important now? Is being close to the shops more or less important? Being close to transport, is that more or less important? I'll give everyone a few moments now to submit all those answers. Okay, interesting to see that the majority are saying that being closer to outdoor facilities is now more important, and the need for flexible spaces, bigger gardens is top 3, being close to the shops is more important, people not wanting to travel so far anymore, and being close to transport links is still very important. So I'll hand back now because I think everybody's had the chance to answer that one. So thank you for participating in that one. Hand back to Adrian now.
Thank you very much, Beth. I will just add that we've added the Slido interaction, just add a bit of interest to the event, because obviously ideally we'd like to meet you face to face, but obviously clearly in national lockdown we can't do that. But if you do have any questions or you don't want to participate in the Slido thing, please do put those in the questions on the right hand side and we can answer those later on. Like I say, it's not compulsory to use Slido, it's just added a bit of interest. So in terms of the vibrant economy, we are all very, very acutely aware that obviously the result of COVID has had dramatic influences on our obviously high streets and town centres. So we are seeking views as part of this consultation on the types of economic development that we should consider in the future, bearing in mind that we're looking to 2038, and the future role of town centres and the uses within them. In other words, how can we enhance and increase footfall in the town centres? We mustn't forget that we also need to promote rural employment opportunities to ensure that people have access to work close to where they live, so it stops them travelling long distances to work. How can the local plan be used to support measures such as working from home? What type of houses do we need in the future? And how can the local plan be used in a positive way to support the green economy and carbon neutrality? And we are very keen to hear people's views on that, because the key thing is the local plan can do a great deal of things in a positive way to support these measures that I've outlined. Next slide, please. So linked to that is the next topic, which is promoting sustainable transport. Clearly that came up in a number of the Slido polls just recently about obviously making sure that houses are accessible to public transport. We are seeking, as part of this consultation, views on whether our existing policies to promote sustainable transport are ambitious enough, or whether or not they need improvement, and if so, how do they need to be improved? And whether development should be concentrated in locations that already have access to cycling, walking and public transport opportunities, and whether or not we need additional park and ride facilities, and if so, where do we need those? And that is an important part of obviously making sure that our district is more sustainable. Next slide, please, Beth. One of the topics, which is called Living Well, crosses over a number of disciplines. The places that we build today will influence the health and well-being of our residents for the future. So we're seeking views on access to the open spaces in the district, and how can we protect them and enhance them to ensure that people's health and well-being is improved, and in particularly reduces inequality. How can we create strong and connected communities and neighbourhoods to support health and well-being? And one of the ideas that came out of the work that was done by the Town Forum for the Vision for Winchester was this concept of the 15-minute neighbourhood concept, about ensuring that facilities and services are within 15 minutes walk of everybody's home. Now clearly that's applicable in some locations and not all, but the concept is there about making sure that people have access to services and facilities, and we're keen to hear people's feedback on that one. Next slide, please. So I'll hand back to Beth now, who could do a Slido one question for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. So this is our last interactive poll for today's event. So what would you like to see more of in towns and high streets across the district in the future? And again, this is a word cloud, so you can enter as many different things as you'd like. And the more times somebody says one phrase or the same word, it'll grow in size so we can see what's the most important. Okay, some really great answers coming through again. So lots of people wanting to see more local businesses, independent businesses, trees, more people within the high streets and across the district, galleries, buses, more activities and green spaces for growing, more interesting footways, affordable homes, offices, meeting places, outside eating places, more leisure facilities, local markets, That's really great. Lots of interesting answers there from everybody. I'll leave it open just for a little bit longer, just to make sure that everyone has a chance to answer this one. So we've got libraries, pop-up shops and events, greenery, outdoor entertainment, variety of businesses, accessible by walking and cycling, social spaces, cycle paths, more of a nightlife. That's really great. Thank you, everyone. So that was our last Slido for this event. So I'll hand back to Adrian now.
Thank you, Beth. So in terms of the low carbon infrastructure and local plan viability, we are seeking views as part of this consultation on our approach towards low carbon infrastructure, such as how can we support proposals for renewable energy and low carbon infrastructure in the local plan, and how can we use the local plan to support, for example, battery storage. So in other words, we save the power where it's being generated so we can use it as obviously other parts of the day. We are doing a call for sites for renewable energy sites. We are very keen to hear for landowners, developers to put forward sites for renewable energy sites to try and boost the rates of renewable energy in the district itself. And I'll come on to the call for sites in a minute. Next slide, please. So one of the other topics is enabling the delivery and success of the local plan. Monitoring is a really important part of the local plan, and we currently produce an authority monitoring report every December that monitors the overall success of the local plan policies and how they're being implemented and how they're being used. And that's a really important source of information. We are asking, as part of this consultation, views on successful monitoring frameworks. In other words, how can we monitor and ensure that we're moving towards where we want to achieve, which is a carbon neutral district by 2030, and specifically linked to that, how can we make sure that we are moving towards that target? So like I say, that's an important part to think about the monitoring indicators right at the start of the process rather than at the end of the process as part of the development of the local plan. Next slide, please. As I've mentioned, alongside the consultation, we are doing a call for sites. We are doing a call for sites for housing. Clearly, we've had a number of housing sites already put forward in the SHELA, the Strategic Housing Economic Land Availability Assessment, but we are seeking sites for housing, for gypsies and travellers, for self-build and custom-build sites. We are seeking and very keen to use brownfield sites. We'd like to know about employment sites, renewable energy sites, which I've just mentioned, sites for biodiversity offsetting, carbon offsetting and nitrate offsetting, which is a specific issue in Hampshire, and green infrastructure. So that consultation and the call for sites runs in the same time to the 12th of April. Next slide, please. So how can you respond to the strategic issues and priorities consultation? I really hope as a result of this virtual event that you will take the time to log on and register your views. And you can do that via the new website on Have Your Say. Please go to the next slide. So the next slide outlines how you can do it. And we've tried to make it as easy as possible. So under the Have Your Say section, you can register to receive email updates on the local plan. There is a link to Citizen Space, which is the Council's public consultation software. And as I said, you can dip in and dip out of the consultation. You can save your response. If you're only interested in one specific topic, you only need to reply to one specific topic. And you can also reply via some short polls. And there's 2 short polls on the website. But we would really encourage you to have a look at Have Your Say section. And if you can respond to this consultation as a result of this event, that would be greatly appreciated. Next slide, please. So how are we going about engaging people? Well, clearly we're in the national lockdown, so we've had to think very differently about how we will engage with people. So we're doing a lot of work with social media. We're doing radio advertisements on Wave Radio. We're putting out a number of posters around the district. We've sent out over 250 posters to GP premises, to hospitals, to local shops, to parish councils, to try and raise the awareness. We're doing newspaper advertisements to try and raise the awareness of the consultation, and we will be advertising in various newspapers again next week. We put posters up at bus stops because we are conscious that people may not be actually catching a bus, but they are daily exercising past bus stops. And obviously, as part of the consultation, we have invited, and you've kindly attended, a range of virtual events. We've got 2 more virtual events next week. One is on Monday afternoon at 2 o'clock on Living Well. So if you're particularly interested in living well, please register via the website to attend that one. And if you're specifically interested in carbon neutrality, there's an event on next Thursday at 2 o'clock. And again, the link is via Eventbrite, and we'll be running one more event section next Saturday morning for those people who can't make it during the week. So please do spread the word. It's exactly the same events as these ones, but the specialist events will focus and drill down more in terms of the issues and how to take those issues forward. We're obviously publicising on the council website, and we're using parish councils to help spread the word. But it is really important that we ask everybody to help raise the profile of this consultation. Next slide, please. So I'll now hand back to Councillor Porter, who will be happy to chair the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Adrian and Bethany, who've managed to get our way through that. I do understand that some people had a bit of problem with a delay on Slido and a bit of a problem getting on. I have to say that's the first time we've had this problem, so it may be just a problem this morning, but please, if you have any comments, please send them in to us. There's a feedback form at the end, and then we'll also make sure that if you have any other questions that you think would be good to add into our published ones, then please do add them now. Thank you. So the first question we have, I'm going to take to Adrian, which is that in the shorter term, COVID-19 and any future pandemics seem the prescient threat. Does the mapping include this, i.e. less use of public transport on the high street, etc.? And are there any thoughts on how increased unemployment and lifestyle changes can be actually used to help reduce the carbon footprints? Thank you, Kim Adams, for that question. Adrian, on to you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Clearly, we're in a national lockdown. We're still unsure what features will be permanent and which ones will be temporary. My personal feeling is obviously some of the changes that have happened as a result of COVID will become more permanent. Clearly, we're all working from home, and whether or not we all return back on a full-time basis to the offices is yet to be determined. I think in terms of obviously the mapping feature, we are keen to explore how the mapping can be used to help us. I know as part of the feedback that we received from another event, people said, can we make sure on the mapping feature we include railway stations and public transport routes? And I think that is a good feature. Clearly, the way that we move forward out of the pandemic is going to determine the type of houses that we require. And clearly, as a result of obviously the Slido question we got, in terms of the types of housing that we need, and whether or not we need more flexible housing to accommodate people working from home, the size of gardens, and obviously the type of business spaces that we're promoting in the local plan, whether or not, for example, we need to look at obviously local hubs where people can come together on a kind of weekly basis with their colleagues. So I think it's a really important question, and thank you for raising it. I think at the moment we're still trying to kind of understand, like many people, how COVID has affected the local plan and will affect it going forward. But clearly there are some positives out of it. Obviously we focus obviously understandably so on the negatives, but there are some clearly positive things coming out of COVID in terms of the way that we are reducing our need to travel, and that is really important. And our lifestyle changes in terms of obviously one of the key issues I mentioned was the 15-minute neighbourhood in terms of shopping locally and supporting local businesses. And I think that they are really important issues. So it is clearly on our radar, and obviously we will be watching this space to see how, in a positive way, the local plan can respond to COVID. Thank you.
Thank you. And obviously, as part of the local plan strategy, a lot of work was done to look at employment as it was in the end of 2019, and then it was updated again in February, March 2020 but obviously life since then has changed so significantly that Winchester City Council has gone out with the Economic Department and the Local Plan Department together to get a new view on what the economy will look like in the future, as far as we're able to determine it. So I think that question is something that all of us can think about, actually, and how our own life has changed and what parts of our own life will change in the future, and our families as well. So the second question is actually just, in fact, it's not a question. Somebody has responded about the Slido, which I've mentioned already. I'm very sorry about that. I don't know why it's taking longer on some machines than others, but as I say, it's been useful to hear the people that have been able to respond. The next question I'm going to pose to Simon Finch, who is our planning director. So is the council planning to meet all of its OA housing need? I think that means affordable housing need, or I don't know what OA means in this situation. 692 dwellings per annum, and is it expecting there to be any unmet need of Southampton to be met by Winchester? Mr. Finch, would you like to reply to that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Porter. Yeah, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Simon Finch. I'm the Corporate Head of Regulatory Services, which includes all things related to planning, including planning policy. So in terms of that's a very good question, actually, and I think there are two elements to this. The first is the planning system that we have to operate within, and at the moment, despite the fact there was a large or major government consultation on changing the planning system back in August, which the council and many councils across the country, in fact 40,000 people responded to. Part of that was to remove the duty to cooperate, and what that means in very simple terms is we have to talk to our neighbours about what we're doing in our local plan, including what they're doing in their areas in terms of housing need. And as you've rightly identified there, under the duty to cooperate, which is currently in the system, and even if it were replaced, it could have a similar requirement, but would be called something slightly different. We have to have a look at that, and there are certainly areas, the cities are the biggest ones, Portsmouth, Southampton, that will have more of a challenge in meeting some of their need because they have a much more restricted area to be able to do that. So unless they build up, they may struggle to do that. Now, so that's where the system comes in, and how we deal with that is that for those of you that don't know, there's a body called Partnership for South Hampshire, which includes all of the Solent districts, including Winchester, because our southern parishes are in that area, and that is doing a piece of work looking at unmet need or future housing needs across that wider area, and we are part of that. So there is a duty to cooperate, and as part of that work, at least to the south of our district, with Southampton, Portsmouth, Fareham, Gosport, Havant, Eastleigh, Test Valley, we are looking at that dimension. At the moment, we don't have an answer. The 692 is the figure that we have given to us effectively by the government, because there is a standard way to calculate that. As a result of which we don't pick that number. That's a number effectively we put the data into, and it produces a number. That number went up with following the public consultation I talked about to over 1,000 a year, and now it's come back down to 692. So we will definitely be planning as a minimum to meet that number, which is our own housing need figure. It remains to be seen whether or not there are discussions to be had over unmet need that cannot be met in those neighbouring districts, but we have to participate in that process. But ultimately it's for the district council here to decide what sites it's comfortable to designate as housing sites, which we're not doing as part of the consultation here. That will follow on later in the Regulation 18 plan, which is our draft local plan, and that will look at allocating sites to get to the housing number that we need to reach. Hopefully I've answered that okay. If I haven't, our technical expert, Mr. Fox, will correct me if I've said anything wrong there, but I think basically that's how we have to look at need from other areas. Thank you, Councillor Porter.
Thank you. Adrian, do you want to say anything, or shall I just conclude that one?
No, I think that's absolutely fine. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. In the future of planning, planning for the future paper, it did actually suggest that actually each district would have a definite number, and there would not be the requirement to take anybody else's need. As we said, that was a white paper, and we're expecting to see the outcome of that white paper perhaps at the end of this year. at this point, therefore, the answer that Mr. Finch has given you is as we are at the moment. We don't know what the future plan is. So next question is, why is it assumed that, well, actually, this is somebody's putting this in as their name, and I think it's an interesting question. I'm going to take these two as a question in total. Why is it assumed that maintaining town centre footfall is a requirement? And then the back of that is, as we head towards carbon neutrality, we should always allow people to monitor what is lost in, say, growth that we might need to achieve this. It's a matter of trade-offs. So the question is really saying, is town centre footfall actually something that we need to perhaps lose in the process of achieving carbon neutrality, I think. Mr. Fox, would you like to talk about that one first?
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Yeah, no, it's a very important question. Thank you for raising it. I think clearly town centres are changing. They're changing as a result of obviously the impacts of COVID, but they're also changing as a result of what the government is doing in terms of permitted development rights. I think what we're trying to do is seek views on what type of change should happen in the town centre in a positive way. In other words, so that we plan for it, so it doesn't happen on an incremental basis. And I think that's important. And it links back to obviously the way that people have changed their living and their lifestyles as a result of COVID, in terms of how they access and use town centres and what their future is. And we are very keen to hear people's views on that. So I think whilst we've asked the question about how do we maintain the footfall, it is about how the town centres change in a positive way, because clearly the government is very keen on residential development. We've asked questions in the strategic issues and priorities documents about how can we utilise the empty spaces above shops in a positive way. So I think it's all about planning in a positive way for the changes that are happening and will take place over the plan period, in terms of obviously the changes to the planning system and also the changes in people's lifestyles. But clearly they are all linked back to carbon neutrality, and obviously the other issue which I raised about the 15-minute neighbourhood in terms of where people actually access their services and facilities. So it is a really important question, so thank you for raising it. I think it is all linked together, and we are very keen to hear people's feedback on the town centres in terms of how they will change and develop. Thank you.
I know there's a lot of interest in access to health facilities as well across the district, and you'll probably know that Hampshire Together is the consultation going on with the hospital about services. So they are part of the services that people currently travel to, and they may not have to travel to them in the future. It may be delivered at your own home. The next question is really interesting, and I'd like Mr. Fox to answer this one, because actually I do know that other people have asked me this question. So considering the Homes for All slide you showed, can you explain clearly how options 1, 2 and 4 differ? Thank you, Mr. Fox.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. I think I would refer people, this is quite a detailed question, to actually have a look at the Strategic Issues and Priorities document, because in that document we do go through the options kind of carefully in detail, and we do kind of put the advantages and disadvantages of the different options. But in kind of summary, the option 1 is very much focused on kind of a lesser kind of growth at Winchester, Winchester itself being obviously the most sustainable location. Option 2 is very much focused on a Winchester kind of allocation of land and obviously distributing the remainder around the district. And option 4 is that we kind of distribute it evenly across the district itself. But I would kind of encourage you to look, if you're particularly interested about the options, at the Strategic Issues and Priorities document, because there are various tables that explain what that actually means in terms of housing numbers. I don't think it's appropriate to kind of go through them in detail here, but I'd kind of encourage you to have a look at the actual Strategic Issues and Priorities document, because it says what has already been committed, i.e. what's got planning permission, what's in the pipeline, and what housing number would be required under the different growth options. And like I say, it provides quite a lot of information, but unless anybody advises me otherwise, I don't think it's appropriate to kind of talk you through as this event. If we were meeting face to face, it would be a bit different, but I think on this event it'd be difficult to talk you through the numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. This one I think is an example actually where we don't just dash to the answers, but have a look in the background papers. in the background papers, it shows it very clearly how options 1, 2 and 4 differ, and the way the housing is allocated across the whole district, or just Winchester centric because it's a sustainable place, looking at putting it in other larger communities as well. So I do recommend that you have a look at that before you complete that section of the paper. If you've got any further queries though, just email the office and someone will go through it, or give them a call on 01962 848 508 and someone will talk you through it. Next question. Will weekly food waste collections be implemented? We could be generating electricity using the biogas waste product by diverting it from landfill. Within landfill, organic matter creates a huge green gas emission from CO2, but more importantly from methane. This could help support alternative energy goals and contribute to the climate neutrality goals. Carbon neutrality goals, sorry. Would Mr. Fox like to answer this, or Bridget possibly? While they're waiting for somebody to come up on the screen, I'd just say that, of course, Winchester City Council collects your waste, but Hampshire County Council disposes of it. So it's a conversation that we're always having with the County Council, and to try and make sure that food is included in the waste that's regenerated in some way. And you'll know that there's been a lot of government consultation about that just before the pandemic, and that brought up a number of issues about finding places to process food in this way. So Mr. Fox, I'm just going to ask you to just, if you want to make any other comment. He's disappeared.
Councillor Porter, I'm happy to take that one.
Thank you, Simon.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's I've said this at recent events. There is planning, and the local plan is a really important tool for things connected to sustainability, reaching and attaining our goals for carbon neutrality, etc. But it's one tool in a box. Waste is something which we can look at in the context of the local plan, but in terms of detail like switching, for example, to weekly collections, is not necessarily something which would form an integral policy within the local plan. It may well be something that councils, including Winchester, decide they want to do or are able to do moving forwards. And as you have already outlined there, Councillor Porter, we're the Waste Collection Authority. That's one side of the coin, but we're not the Waste Disposal Authority, which in this instance is Hampshire. So we work through something called Project Integra to try to join all these things together. What you will also may be aware of is that government has its environment bill and is looking also at waste strategy moving forwards, including things like deposit schemes, return deposit schemes, and food waste. So whilst we can look at it in terms, as we always do, in terms of individual developments, in terms of provision for storage, etc., really important in places like flats, for example, where you don't get gardens and things, waste storage therefore it needs to be planned in, and we could have policies, I think, potentially around those detailed areas. But I think there's a broader decision there, not necessarily just a sort of planning decision about the collection and disposal of food waste, for example. But what I do know, and my colleague Campbell Williams, that some of you may have come across, who is our service lead for environment, is very much involved in those discussions, and they're definitely coming up the level of importance, because you know, government is looking for or considering changes to the way that waste is dealt with. I think I'm right in saying that this is where the two sides of the coin, collection and disposal, I think I'm right in saying in Hampshire at least, I think the only one I know that's doing this currently is Eastleigh, I think. So you know, it is quite a challenge, but it's clearly something which I know is going to be considered as we move forward as an authority, as authorities across the country are going to have to do. Thank you, Councillor Porter.
Councillor Porter, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. I think that's the saying of the year, isn't it, really? I was just going to say that part of the local plan, well, the main point about the local plan is about land planning, about allocating land for different purposes. And one of the things that we do find, certainly as a local councillor I hear so often, is we really want to recycle, but not here, not near me. And this is one of the real challenges we have as a local authority. There's a minerals and waste plan review going on at the county council. We all want to recycle more, including food, and process it. But we have to find ways that we can create sites that don't create a problem for their neighbours. And that may be an eco site, a large one near to a major transport hub, or it may be lots of smaller sites right across the district. But it's certainly something that presents a real problem to land planning, and we'd really appreciate to hear your views back on that. I think that's a really important part of this local plan. Certainly in the last few years, I have discovered that there's a real market for recycled road materials and building materials, but it's very, very seasonal. So to make a profit, those companies that do that work need to be thinking about holding that stock for quite some time. So it's not just a building, it's also yard space, and perhaps it doesn't always look the prettiest, and the vehicles that are going backwards and forwards. And we've got to ask ourselves, where do we want those things to happen? So it's a very interesting part of the local plan, and really I appreciate your views back on that. So on the next question from Debbie Harding, will the local plan give any opportunity for villages to select sites for delivery of a specific housing type to meet needs? For example, bungalows. Adrian, I think that's for you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. No, I've made it very clear in a number of presentations, and would like to make it clear. We're very keen to work with parish councils to identify the future of their settlements. We have, as you know, got a number of sites that have been put forward by developers, land promoters in the Sheila. And what I've said to people is that this particular consultation, the Strategic Issues and Priorities consultation, is not about specific sites, but there's a good window of opportunity for parish councils to come together to look at those sites that have been put forward by landowners, developers, and to look at other sites in their villages and settlements, and to come hopefully some kind of consensus about which sites are good, which sites could be capable of development, and which sites are not capable of development. And we really do want to work with parish councils to identify the future of their settlements, and that's something I am very, very keen on. And in terms of obviously meeting the specific needs, we do appreciate that obviously certain villages and certain settlements have specific needs, whether or not that's bungalows or affordable housing. And again, we are keen to hear from local communities about where that should be and the number of it. I would refer people to the evidence base that is being prepared for the local plan, which is the Strategic Housing Market Assessment, that identifies the types of housing that will be required in the district to 2038. Like I say, I am very clear and very keen to work with parish councils to identify which sites should be allocated for development, and to hopefully have those discussions, hopefully face to face during the summertime, where we can actually come together and say, well, these are our findings. What local knowledge do you have about these sites, and which sites are the most appropriate sites to come forward in the next version of the local plan? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question is, why isn't there a don't know option? There is actually an open text section in each of the responses on the website. So each of the topics has got an open text question, so you can certainly just put your comment in there. So the answer to why isn't there a don't know option. When the pandemic subsides, we can expect that central Winchester will return to being clogged with traffic. Is it not possible to set explicit targets to reduce this, rather than just indirectly by improving public transport, walking and cycling as in the plan? Simon Finch, would you like to answer this?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Porter. I'm not sure that the local plan can set specific targets, but what this is about is joined up thinking, and that's absolutely critical to what we're doing. Now, obviously, in Winchester, in the district, there's a two-tier system here, so we have to work with our colleagues at Hampshire County Council, and of course we consult them on everything we're doing in terms of developing the policies that will go into the local plan. But what I was going to mention was that some may have come across a project that I worked with the County Council on, and we did a joint movement strategy for Winchester. And one of the fundamental aims of that, it was to find ways to reduce the amount of traffic that's going through the middle of Winchester, because that's causing problems in terms of environment, air quality, and therefore health impacts, etc. And we have seen some improvements there actually over the past a couple of years, where there has been a steady improvement, but that's no room for complacency. And it isn't just about Winchester City either. We may want to go further and have policies, broader policies, which tackle the standard of air quality, etc., and improving health. Now, it's about doing that in the round. So how can the local plan come in and help to achieve that? Well, it certainly can play a part in that, and trying to drive down, if you forgive the pun, drive down the amount of traffic in the city centre. Adrian Fox mentioned earlier the concept of 15-minute city or 15-minute neighbourhood. What that's aimed at doing, particularly in the bigger settlements like Winchester, is reducing the need necessarily to hop in the car and drive. That's one of the things that we are certainly very interested in looking at how we can achieve that by providing services that you can walk to, cycle to, etc. within 15-20 minutes of where you live, reducing the need to travel further. In terms of the movement strategy, there was also a lot of work done, and Adrian Fox mentioned this in passing earlier, about park and ride. And so as part of the movement strategy work with Hampshire, we are looking actively to expand the park and ride operation, and in some cases could be park and walk. It doesn't have to necessarily be park and ride on buses. And we have aspirations to do that at Barfield Close, the former Voltex site. On the eastern side of the city, to increase the capacity for park and ride. So there are a number of things that we can do, and in fact actually myself and some of the other planning team were on a call about air quality yesterday for the whole of Hampshire, and there's been some good work done there as well in Southampton in particular, in a place called St Denny's that many of you will probably have come across. It has a train station there. So I think what I see this as is a sort of multi-pronged way of dealing with this issue. It's a planning issue, clearly transport and traffic is, but it's a broader issue too. And we've got other tools in the bag, whether that's provision of car parking, park and ride, other infrastructure that we can provide to reduce the traffic, because I think everybody would be very pleased to see less traffic in the city centre. Thank you, Councillor Porter.
Thank you. I'm just going to elaborate on that, because I've been sitting at some parish councils listening to this, and people are very concerned that the 15-minute conversation is just very much city centre focused. A 15-minute neighbourhood could work really well in Whiteley, it could work really well in Waterlooville, in Colden Common, in Denmead, and in particular in the market towns in Alresford, Wickham and Bishop's Waltham. We think that if we certainly as a resident near to Alresford, you can do everything there. You can even be buried now. There's an undertaker there as well, and it's that having that local facilities that makes it really important and makes that area really sustainable and easier to avoid taking the car. So I do urge people to think about that, not just as a Winchester city centre concept, but also for your own area too, and whether you can even think about ways in which that would be close to where facilities would be close to home. Thank you. The next question is about, will we always have to build more homes? Simon, I'm going to come back to you about that one as well.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. The simple answer is we have to plan for the need, basically. That's at the planning system, unless there was a fundamental change, which we're not expecting, even in light of the white paper consultation last year, where lots of changes were floated as ideas. And as I said, there were over 40,000 responses, so it certainly captured people's imaginations. But what we have to do is, at the moment, it's based as you hear a lot of talk about evidence-based. All that really means is it's information that feeds into the local plan. So what we're doing in the local plan is something which reflects, in this case, housing need locally, and that's what we have to have a look at, and that's what we pull together. But as I said before, in the previous question, the figure at the moment is given to us effectively by the government through their national policy, which generates a housing figure once you put the data into it, and it's that data that forms part of our evidence base. So unless there's a fundamental change in that, and therefore the need goes down, then it's hard to see currently, particularly with some of the demographic trends, household trends, things like that, where that is likely to be different in terms of, I've often thought this myself, in terms of would you ever get into a position where in actual fact there is an oversupply of housing because the population has adjusted and the need goes down. That's not ever been the case, and I've been doing planning well over 30 years, so probably too long, but that's never been the case. So the simplest answer therefore is we have to accommodate and plan for need. If that's adjusted, then the figure goes down or it can go up. And that's what we're required to do. So unless there's a fundamental shift either in the population characteristics or the way that the government expects all councils to plan, then I think at the moment, in the foreseeable future, you're probably looking at planning for more housing rather than zero housing or even replanning where housing is being taken out of use. In other parts of the country, I was really talking here about Winchester in the southeast, you will have seen many pictures of hundreds and hundreds of vacant homes. Terrible, really, but they're just not homes that are in the right places. So in other parts of the country, they will have very different plans to pick up on that. But certainly where we are, the need is very strong, particularly around affordable housing, because, as you will be aware, Winchester District is not an inexpensive place to live, as a result of which we've got to look at that as well. And we have our own council house building programme, which is an element of that, with an aspiration to build 1,000 units. So we're trying to do what we can holistically to try to address that affordable housing problem. Thank you, Councillor Porter.
Thank you. And of course, this council uses the results of the census, which is on 21st of March 21. So please do fill that in, because that gives us an idea right across the country of where people are living and where they're working. It also, we do have absolute knowledge of the birth rates in Hampshire and in our own district. We have the data about which children go to school, and we follow them through their school life, and we know that what they're doing, whether they're likely to remain here or whether they're going to come back here if they go away to education. We also watch the divorce rate, and we also know our employment rates as a local authority. We also know that people divorce, and then they often need two homes for a while, at least for a while, if not permanently. And we also know that people are living much longer, and that will maybe be affected by the COVID deaths that we've had in the district as well. So there are lots of different data that come to us that can give us an idea, but also the government do collect all that data through the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, and that's what partly feeds into the information that we need to know about whether our housing number will remain stable, go up or go down. If you recall, in August, the government suggested that we needed to build 1,024 homes a year. That threw us into quite a difficult situation, and we certainly objected to that number. We didn't think it was what we needed. Once the calculation has been changed and we're down to 692, we think that's much more reflective of what we need for the district, as long as we can get a good share of that as affordable housing. So the next question is from Steve. Will the delivery of the local plan be hindered through lack of investment from Hampshire County Council where changes within their remit? So, for example, sustainable travel. Adrian, do you want to come back on that one? Or Simon?
I can perhaps start,
Yeah.
Councillor Porter,
Okay.
if that's helpful.
Thank you.
I think the key thing is that we are working in partnership with Hampshire County Council, and linked to that is that the options that we are seeking feedback on is seeking obviously views on how we should distribute future housing. Now clearly option 4, which distributes development more around the district, is kind of least sustainable in terms of obviously we all know that obviously Winchester is the most sustainable location in the district in terms of services and facilities. So I think that's linked back to that point about we are keen to make sure that we put the development where it is most sustainable. Clearly kind of the bus routes and the bus infrastructure is not something that's under the district council's remit itself, but we are working in partnership with Hampshire County Council as part of our evidence base for the local plan to try and make sure that we put obviously development in the most sustainable locations. So I think it's all a case of working in partnership with our service providers such as Hampshire County Council, Stagecoach, etc., who provide the buses, and thinking obviously about the park and ride facilities where they're located. So I think the whole thing is that's why we're seeking feedback on the different growth options in terms of how we should distribute it around the district itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon, did you want to comment or not? Happy to leave it at that. I'm just going to raise the fact that over the last 5 years or so, we've been having what's called community infrastructure levy, where a developer provides funds to contribute to the infrastructure. This was always a criticism before, which was we get the buildings, but we don't get the infrastructure. So actually, Winchester City Council has an extensive programme of contributing to the cost of those public infrastructure projects through using that infrastructure levy. And that's reported every year, but actually that's another way in which the council can influence and drive the change. Steve has also asked about existing housing stock in private hands as a major contributor to carbon footprint. How can the council influence and drive the change in this area? Who'd like to answer this one?
I'm happy to start, Councillor Porter.
Thank you.
I think it's a really important question, Steve, is that what is actually within the council's remit to do? Clearly, obviously, the council as a housing provider can influence the type of housing stock that it provides. And obviously, that is something that we're very keen to obviously explore and obviously make sure that it's strengthened. But linked to that, again, it comes back to working with our partners, because you may be aware that Hampshire County Council have just launched a solar panel community energy buying scheme. That's open for everybody to register, and it's an important way to register your interest in kind of solar panels for your house. They then take that information and they see how much of a interest there is, and they go to solar providers and try and get the best possible price, and the solar providers then bid on that and come back, and there's no obligation. They will then obviously give you a price for solar panels for your house. So that's, for example, one initiative that's taken by Hampshire County Council. Clearly the government promoted, unfortunately they stopped it, the kind of energy efficiency grants. But I think it's the promotion and the education, which is also important, about how people can obviously reduce the energy requirements in their house. But like I say, I'd encourage you to have a look at the Hampshire County Council. It's called the Group Buying Scheme for Solar Panels, and it's part of their commitment to tackle climate change. And please have a look on their website, because there's a lot of information about how homeowners can be part of that scheme. And like I say, there's no obligation in terms of taking it forward, but I would encourage you to have a look at that scheme. Thank you.
And I think Simon wants to come in on this one as well. Thank you, Adrian. While Simon's just coming on to this call, I'm just going to mention that, of course, Winchester City Council owns over 5,000 of our own houses, our own housing stock. And so that is also something that we have allocated a budget to reducing their carbon footprint. Simon, did you want to add something to this one?
Yeah, I think so, and it is a good question, and it goes back to the point I made earlier. You know, the local plan is really important, and it can achieve a lot. It can help to shape development over the next 15 plus years, really important. And at the heart of it, as we've already said several times today, and was reflected in the feedback as well on that we were getting from the people that have taken the time to come to today's event, sustainability, low carbon is really important. The other side of that, I mean, clearly, how you deal with the existing housing stock, and as Adrian's mentioned there are other ways to do that, even if planning can't go back, because it can't do things retrospectively. But what it can do, and this is really important, is on the other side of it is how you generate energy, and obviously green energy, and that is also part of the strategic issues and priorities paper that we got out for consultation. And in actual fact, we have got in the past, we've had quite a good record actually on, for example, the number of solar farms that have received planning permission within the district and now are online, up and running. There's a huge one at Southwark, at Portsdown Hill. There are various other ones dotted around in Alresford and other places between Bishop's Waltham and Waltham Chase. And in actual fact, they're not particularly controversial either. So we're looking for people to respond on that side of the coin, as well as what we can do in terms of housing stock to improve how green that energy generation actually is. So going to the source of it, if you like. So that's another component that we can have in the local plan about having, you know, positive policies around that type of energy generation. Thank you, Councillor Porter.
Thank you. I take issue with the not particularly controversial. Most of them aren't, but some of them are very controversial. And I think that's an interesting part to challenge. And in fact, the next question really is, how ambitious do you feel the local plan is? Are you pushing hard enough and reaching high enough? Or do you feel you're being slightly cautious in order to achieve the objectives? Actually, that's one of the questions you're asked in the questions is, do you think we're being okay, not ambitious enough, or too ambitious? So I think that's a really good one for you to answer. Simon, did you want to answer this one?
I think you've largely answered what I would have said. I think really the only thing we just need to be conscious of is how we operate within the national policy framework. So whilst councils obviously have discretion and they can use judgment based upon local circumstance and have policies that reflect that, ultimately where we may be constrained on these sorts of areas are only really by what the government says, you know, local planning authorities can and cannot do. So all plans that have to be found sound when they go through this local plan process, which towards the end includes a full examination in public by a government appointed inspector, we've got to get the plan over the line. So if we're not following government guidance around anything, whether it be housing or sustainability, employment or whatever, we'd have to have a very compelling reason to be able to persuade an inspector that that was reasonable. So I think we can be ambitious, but we have to be conscious of the fact there is a wider policy context which we have to be aware of when we're formulating our policies. Thank you, Councillor Porter.
Thank you. I have to say it's been a constant, and the officers will back me up on this, it's been a constant frustration of mine that we can't just say we'd like 0 carbon homes from today, but the way in which the law works, we can't do that at the moment. We need to be able to find a way of putting it into our local plan and it also being overarching government policy. Or we just do it by sheer economics and the commercial market will determine it, I think, long term. So the next question is, the impact of the local plan will extend well beyond 2038 and drive the way in which those who are currently in secondary and higher education live and work in the future. How confident are you that the younger constituents will be able to make their wishes known, and do you have any specific plans to actively seek their input? Adrian, I think you can answer this one. And just the point about the local plan extending well beyond 2038, absolutely. And one of the things, the point is the current local plan goes to 2031, of course. And so we're really in this new local plan defining the way in which we can talk about future development, but specifically allocating further sites from between 2031 to 2038. So actually it's just under 2,700 homes, just so that just puts that in the fray. Adrian, are you going to talk about this one, about secondary and higher education pupils who will be living here in 2038?
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Yes, we have, obviously we are in national lockdown, but we have approached the Hampshire County Council Education Lead on separate occasions and asked him to put various information about the local plan consultation in local schools newsletters. We have written to the further established education establishments, again given them material about the local plan consultation. And we have obviously launched the new local plan website, which hopefully has a much kind of younger feel about it and is very much easily designed around being easily accessible on the mobile phone. In parallel with that, the council has been engaging with younger people, and it will form part of the evidence base on a younger person home strategy, and that's an important part of the strand of work that will feed into the local plan. So we are trying our best to engage with the younger audience and to make sure that they are aware, because clearly, as the person has pointed out, this plan will go to 2038, and we're trying to understand what kind of district they want to live in 2038. So we are trying our best to reach out and engage with the younger generation as part of this local plan process. But it is hard in terms of obviously how we get them excited and interested in it. But this is clearly only the first stage of the journey that we're embarking on in terms of the local plan. So like I say, this is all part of our engagement strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you have any young people in your family or anybody you know, ask them to look at it on a mobile phone. It's pretty easy, or online, and they don't need to fill out every section, just the sections that interest them. And it's quite it's quite scary, really, that someone who's 18 now will be about 35, I think, by 2038. So there we are. The next question, I think it may be the last. I think Joan Ashton's going to answer. If the current move of retail to online continues, how will town and city centres be repurposed for housing? Joan.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. I think Adrian may have covered some of this earlier when we need to look at the future role of our town centres, Winchester Town Centre and indeed the market towns as well. We are looking at in ways to encourage and be more flexible about using upper stories of building for residential. And it's certainly one of the questions that we'd encourage you to answer in our consultation about how you feel the town centres should look in the future. Government has been encouraging a more residential in town centres and has made development rights more flexible in order to enable this. There is, it is a bit, our view, I think, initially is that we need to try and strike a balance, and we wouldn't necessarily want the town centres to become too dominated by residential. We have said that we would like to maintain a vibrant economy in the town centres as well, but we would be interested to hear people's views as to whether they really feel that we should be providing a lot more residential in the town centre in the future. As we said, also the situation with COVID and changing economy is throwing a few more changes into the mix. So it is very much early days into how we deal with this. I'm conscious that we are running out of time now, so I'll hand you back to Councillor Porter to sum up.
Thank you, but I just wanted to just touch on, Joan, if you could, the challenge of the changing class uses, and I know that people have been concerned about that, about parades of shops as well as town centres themselves. Do you just want to touch on that?
Yes, there is a consultation which has recently finished from the government about making it easier to change from commercial businesses, not just offices, but also restaurants and shops, to residential without the need for planning permission. And I think as a council and officers, we have raised some concerns with the government about that. We are concerned that that may lead to a loss of, for instance, whole parades of shops, which would be detrimental to local provision of facilities. I'm sure the government would have had a lot of feedback on this consultation, and it remains to be seen whether they adjust their proposals in the light of that.
Thank you, because without with permitted development rights, it means that the quality of those homes wouldn't necessarily be what we would consider an acceptable home in Winchester, and also would be a changing face to those very much needed local parades of shops as well as the town centre itself. So it's certainly something that we made our comments on, and we are going to be watching that with great interest. Adrian Fox has also put in the notes, just a reminder, we've also been engaging people and including young people on the local plan process through Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and we had a number of young people involved in sustainability, climate, and a lot of other, as we've mentioned, currently a housing and home project. So we are going back to those as well. So do please watch out for the Facebook comments or Instagram and pass them on. Thank you. So we're coming to the end today now. So thank you very much indeed to the planning team for your responses today. And I do hope that you, the public, will submit a response to strategic issues and on priorities consultation by the 12th of April via our website, which is on the screen. If you're or a colleague is interested in attending any of our special events on carbon neutrality, living well or the vibrant economy, please email planningpolicy@winchester.gov.uk for details. I'd really like to thank you for attending today, which has made this event so interesting and actually very thought-provoking. It's really helpful. We all take notes and discuss them afterwards. I hope you found it useful too. we're always aiming to improve. So there is a feedback link on the screen, which you can go to directly, or we will also send a link to that feedback form after the event. So thank you very much for coming along today. I really appreciated your questions and interest, and I'd just like to say goodbye from the team and goodbye from me. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.